Hello, class. So, as promised, here's a little preview to the ethical speaking chapter, or not really a preview. I'm gonna actually kind of highlight some of the things in the chapter for you to pay attention to. And then tomorrow in class, we're gonna do the group exercise because so here are the questions. And this is chapter 4, ethical public speaking. So hopefully you have read the chapter. It's not very long, but it is very important. And so our focus questions are: what is an ethical public speaker? What does that mean? And why do we have a responsibility to be an ethical speaker in the first place? And the next question is, do we have freedom of speech? That we say we do, it's protected under our First Amendment rights, but we have all kinds of political arguments going on right now and controversies, and this idea of cancel culture, right? That you can't speak about certain topics. Both sides shut each other down and talk about the cancel culture. And then the final question is, what is the relationship between what's ethical to say in public and what's legal to say, because those are two different things. Those are very two different things. And then how can you apply it? How does this all apply to you in public speaking for this class, etc.? So first, what is an ethical public speaker? Well, first let's define what ethics is. The word ethics comes from the Greek word ethos, which means character. In other words, what sort of character are you? What do you stand for? Are you basically a good person? Can we trust you? Are you competent? Are you either informing us or persuading us about topics with a sense of goodwill? You're not trying to rile up your audience and get them to do something unethical, theoretically. So that's ethos. And actually Aristotle said in order to persuade an audience, you actually needed logos, pathos, and ethos. So logos, we say logos in America. You may hear it as logos in other countries, but logos is logic. Ethos is ethical appeal. And finally, pathos is emotional appeal. And so ethos doesn't just apply to whether or not what you're trying to get us to do or change is ethical. It actually applies to you, the speaker. Do we perceive you to be an ethical person? Do we perceive you to have positive ethos so that we have a sense of trust, right? And so, as your book points out, the audience needs to perceive you as being competent, that you're honest and straightforward, you have good moral character, and again, that you have your listeners' best interests in mind, a sense of goodwill. Quintilian, who was a great Roman orator, and he's kind of a fun guy because he really set up a lot of our education, the ancient world's educational system. But anyway, he defined an ethical public speaker as a good man speaking well. And of course, we'll update it for today. So it'd be, good people being a good person speaking well, right? So that's sort of fun. I was about to get him confused with Demosthenes. He was another Greek orator, and I believe he's the one. He had a stutter. He had a stutter and a lisp, and he wasn't a very good, or he was perceived at first to not be a very good speaker. So the story goes that he would go out to the seashore and he would project his voice over the roaring waves and put pebbles in his mouth to improve his diction and articulation and get over his stutter, if you can imagine. But anyway, so that was Demosthenes, and then he went down in history as giving one of the greatest orations, one of the greatest public speeches. But Anyway, and then Quintilian was the Roman guy. And then, of course, here you can't get away from Aristotle. So that's the first part. What ethos do you have? Do you have a positive ethos? You can even go to Starbucks. I think they still sell it. Starbucks sells the ethos water that supposedly every time you buy one of those bottles of water, they donate a portion to help people in other countries get clean water. But then someone said one time, yeah, but what about all the plastic that's building up in the environment? So is this really ethos water because of all the plastic bottles? So I don't know, but they used to sell their ethos water. So so that's one of the things, and so we need to perceive that you're trustworthy, you respect your audience, and again you have a sense, and that you're competent, you've done your research, you're not just BSing us, correct? So those are some of the things. And of course, in order to do that, I would argue the first step to being an ethical public speaker is to gain insight into what are your own values, what is your system of right and wrong, because that's what ethics is. Okay, well, it's related. If you want to split hairs, there is a difference between the whole study of ethics and ethical rules, versus morals, which is your value system, what is right and wrong. But basically that's what we're talking about. Are you ethical? Do you stand for the right things? Do you have a sense of right and wrong? What are your values? Where did those values come from? And another step, and this goes right back to chapter 1 with frame of reference, because this can be difficult, right? Because if we're in a democracy, we're dealing with uh, so many different value systems, so many different backgrounds. And so the argument goes, it can become quite difficult because what's ethical for you might not be ethical for the audience, or just like it's frame of reference. What seems totally straightforward and correct and right in our frame of reference and according to our value system, it is not for certain members of the audience. So you have to be a little bit careful. You don't want to be what's called ethnocentric, and your book does talk about that. Being ethnocentric, ethno as in ethnic, okay, don't confuse that with ethics. Being ethnocentric means your ethnicity is the center, is the right one. So we use ethnocentric to say, basically, to argue that it's the belief that your frame of reference, your country, your background, your race is the correct one. And so you have to be careful of that. Uh, this doesn't mean you give up your own value system. Okay, that's not what this means. It simply means, just like we were looking at the optical illusion with the old woman and the young woman, we're not just dealing with two faces. We're in a multifaceted society. So you need to be respectful, and learn to realize, you know what? I'm really looking at this through the old woman perspective. My audience is looking at it more this way, and other people are looking at it more this way. So just being respectful, aware of those different frames, and trying to find common ground with your audience. Doesn't mean you have to give up your own values. It just means you're respectful of other people's, which sounds pretty straightforward, but it's not. It becomes rather treacherous. And I'll give some more examples in class. Well, I'll give one now. Um, you know, I had a student one time in my class who was basically legally blind. Okay, he was visually impaired, and really could not see very well. And so, you know, from a seeing person's frame of reference, we forget. We treat everyone as if they can see. So we'd put the PowerPoints up there, and well, as you can see, according to this PowerPoint, blah blah blah, and he'd be like, "Excuse me, I can't see it." You know, hello, we needed to adjust for him. We needed to include him as well, because what we were doing was outside his frame of reference. We were leaving him out. So that's just an example. You want to do the research, and we're going to talk more about this when we get to audience analysis. But that's one of the key points. So what is an ethical speaker? Someone who's competent, who's done their research, someone who knows what they stand for, okay, who's fair, and someone who has goodwill. You're not trying to get the audience, you're not trying to persuade the audience to do something wrong. Okay, so you're good, you have good moral character, and you have goodwill, and you have positive ethos. The information you're conveying to the audience should help them in some way. What you're trying to persuade them to do should be beneficial to them and the community at large. But again, you know, as this plays out, it gets a little more complex. So listen to this. This is fun. So, an ethical speech appeals to the greater good rather than to narrow self interest. Mm-hmm. Tell this to some of our politicians and people in power, right? It steers clear of invective or verbal attacks designed to discredit and belittle those with whom you disagree. So, calling people names, making fun of them, you're telling people they're an alcoholic, don't vote for them. This is a logical fallacy. It's a classical logical fallacy called the ad hominem argument, which literally means against the man. You're attacking the person rather than focusing on the issue. It's a fallacy of reason. You're not supposed to do it, but oh my God, can you find me a political ad that does not do that? Can you? I've never seen one. Another word for it is mudslinging. The opponents are slinging mud at each other rather than focusing on the issues. So, ethical speakers avoid arguments that target a person instead of the issue at hand, or that are built upon other fallacies of reasoning, which we're going to get to when we talk more about persuasive speaking. Now, so that sort of gives you an overview, right? So now let's talk about the next question. Do we have freedom of speech? I mean, goodness, it's one of our most sacred rights, right? It's our First Amendment right. It's not the Second Amendment, it's not the Fifth Amendment, it's not the 10th Amendment, it is our First Amendment. So, do we have freedom of speech? What do you think? Some people say yes, some people say no. I'm going to ask you this as a matter of fact in class and see what you come up with. Sorry, the sun coming here in through the window is bothering me just a tiny bit. This is called self-feedback, and I'm getting distracted by it, so I apologize. Let me try to continue and ignore that. So, do we have freedom of speech? And again, perhaps we can talk about this a little bit in class and talk about um, this new phenomena. It's not new at all, called cancel culture. And my sister had an interesting example. So she was going to college back in the 1960s, and she talked about how I guess there was a professor there who really was to the far left, was basically being accused of being a communist and that kind of thing, and a liberal, and too liberal, too far left, a communist basically. And they wanted to basically shut him up. No, you can't say that in class. You can't publish this article. Uh, you can't be saying these things. And so she actually wrote an op-ed in the college newspaper that argued no, he should have the right to say his opinion. We don't have to agree with it, but he should have a right to say it. And then she argued that now it's kind of flip-flopped, that she just read where where now, because she went to UTEP, so now the same thing has happened, only that professor is more to the far right, is more on to the right of things. So, you know, probably being called a fascist, right? So, and people are saying no, he shouldn't have the right to say these things. And so here it is flip flopped, with was cancel culture back then on the left for this guy. And then here's an example that she gave where it's cancel culture on the right. I think we're experiencing it on both sides, but but under, according to the First Amendment, that speech is protected. So let me ask you a question though. And here it gets to the third question, the relationship between ethical speech and legal speech, because here is the kicker. What is legal to say is not necessarily ethical to say. And here's where we get into 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 trouble. Well, here's where it becomes complex. So, do we have freedom of speech? Not completely. There are certain forms of speech that are illegal. If someone wanted to prosecute you, they could take you to court and say, you know what? You were engaged in this type of illegal speech, and you could take them to court and, basically sue them so that they either have to pay a fine or go to jail or whatever the legal consequence is. So what type of speech is illegal? What type of speech is not protected by the First Amendment? Well, you probably learned this in another civics class, but we're going to repeat it here. Speech that incites people to violence, or what we call fighting words. And this gets tricky because here's the thing, and in your book tells you right here, hate speech, okay, speech that is racist, sexist, ageist, gay bashing, other forms of negative or hate speech against any group that's directed towards their race, ethnicity, national origin, gender, religion, sexual orientation, disability, and the like, is not illegal. Okay? It's unethical, but it's not illegal. So you can get up there and you can call the people all the terrible um, racist, sexist slurs, and you really can't be prosecuted for that. That's not illegal. But as soon as you say, let's go kill the you know who's, or let's go get them, let's go beat them up, now let's go after them with our baseball bats, now you've crossed the line into illegal speech. Okay, and so think about what's happening now with the January. Sorry, I am going to move this. It's driving me crazy. Okay, probably driving you crazy too. Anyway, think of what's going on with the January 6th uh, deal, um, with the attack on the Capitol. So it's been the committee, there's a committee set up to see, did former President Trump, did he incite violence? Were those fighting words? Did he help to incite that crowd? Or did he just get them riled up and then they took themselves in and, you know, and therein is the problem. It's hard to prove. It's hard to prove what that person's intent was. So, but that's an example right now. Some people are arguing no, he didn't incite the violence. Other people are saying yes. Either way, we ended up with violence. So, so that's illegal. You can call them all the names. You're not going to be arrested for hate speech unless it can be proven that it led to somebody's murder or physical injury. But once you say, let's go get them, now you're in illegal territory. Speech that expresses blackmail, perjury, child pornography, or obscenity is also illegal. So that you have to be careful with that. And speech that can also be shown that invades the person's right to privacy. And this can be tricky too, like protecting your source. Speech that can be proved to be defamatory or potentially harmful to an individual's reputation at work or in the community, which is called slander. So you're saying things about this individual, you're slandering them, you're saying negative things, and they aren't true. Okay? They're not true. You showed a reckless disregard for the truth. You knew what you were saying was dishonest and you said it anyway. So that can be illegal as well. So slander, and I don't know which side of it, I don't care which side of the controversy you're on, but here's another example. The whole lawsuit with Johnny Depp and Amber Heard, right? So he was, one court said she was right, that no, she didn't commit slander. And another court said, yeah, she did, and upheld Johnny Depp's side. But Johnny Depp was losing work because of the outcome of that other trial. So, here, and actually it was libel because the things she said actually were in a, got printed up in I think it was the Daily Mail. But anyway, so those are the forms of illegal speech. Fighting words, slander, if it can be proven you showed a reckless disregard for the truth, and certain speech that invades people's privacy, like revealing reporter sources, or if someone used, for example, I remember when my children were in school, I had to sign a form every year that said, yes, you can use my child's picture in promotional material if they were happening to be coming around and taking pictures. I had to sign off on that because if they had used my child's picture without my permission, I could sue them. You see, my child is a minor. You can't be using them for publicity without my permission. It invades the privacy. But again, this works out in very complex ways because it's not applied equally. Celebrities, politicians, public figures, it's not very easy to for them to win a case where they've been slandered or libeled. Yeah, a private citizen has a much better chance because I don't know, you just put a big old target on your back, right? When you become a public figure, unfortunately, and they're coming for you. They're going to dig up the dirt. I don't care if you're a Democrat, Republican, Independent, or what, a Martian, they're going to go for the dirt. We're going to be looking for, you know, for that material. Oh, the other one is Herschel Walker, all that stuff. I don't know if you've been following it. So, and then another thing, but realize, so those are illegal forms of speech, but what's legal to say is not necessarily ethical. You shouldn't be using hate speech. You shouldn't be using racist, sexist, ageist, etc. terms, right? You want to respect people in your audience. That is not showing goodwill. But again, if you're trapped in your own frame of reference, then that can be very difficult. You have to educate yourself. You have to educate yourself. You have to research. So, and that we're going to again talk about that more in detail with audience analysis. Also, beware the heckler's veto. There are certain instances where a public speaker can't get two words out of their mouth because the hecklers are like, no, boo. Um, and it's hard to listen to things that are overtly racist, sexist, etc. It's really hard to listen to. So why do we protect that? That's the real question. Well, why do we protect that under the First Amendment? I mean, why can the Proud Boys organize? Why can the Ku Klux Klan organize? Why can some people? Uh, I'm trying to think of a corollary to why can someone that say we need to be a communist country? Why do we let them speak? Why are they protected? But I'm really going for the racism, sexism stuff because I just think that's clearly unethical. But again, Not if you're a Proud Boy. They argue the opposite. So why do we let protesters or people who clearly in our minds they're spewing hate speech, why are they usually protected under the First Amendment? Um, and we know the usual answers, but I want to float that out to you, you know. And I think this exercise we're going to do, it's going to help you get at your value system and some of your classmates, but we're going to come back to the answer to that full circle. And of course, another thing well, maybe I'll just leave it there. We'll talk more about that in class. We'll come back to that. So why do we let those groups practice? And I'll give you another example in class. Remind me to tell you about the Westboro Baptist Church, which has nothing to do with the real Baptist Church. Do not go after the real Baptists. So as an example. So the first thing you have to know as an ethical public speaker is what you stand for. You don't want to be ethnocentric. You want to recognize the different frames of reference in your audience. You don't have to agree with them, but you're respectful. And you make sure you've done your research, you're competent. You don't plagiarize. You want to cite the sources of your information. I wish we would pass a law that makes politicians have to cite the sources of the information they are telling us. And geez, and now with the media, forget it. You've got to do fact checking, and then you have to fact check the fact checkers. But I do have some that are recommended by the Library of Congress and the Librarians Association, fact checkers that are good, and then also it tells you any bias in the fact checkers. So we'll do that too when we get on down the road a little bit. So that is pretty much it, because you don't want to plagiarize. You want to make sure that you acknowledge who you got your information from. And I wanted to give you an example too, as it talks about having dignity and integrity as a public speaker, and again, not misrepresenting things. And I think one of the most jaw-dropping moments for me um, was when they showed the clip when Senator McCain died, John McCain. I don't know if some of you probably don't even know who he is. Senator McCain ran against Obama. Okay, he was running against him so it was the presidential race. All right, and then later, Senator McCain, he's a senator from Arizona. I hope I have that right. Speaking of checking sources, but anyway, and he was normally, conservative, Republican, right? But really stood up against his own party and later this was President Trump, because he disagreed with his party's values and where they were going with certain policies, and kind of stood up against his own party when he felt they were going to do something that was unethical. Okay, so, and he was sort of the maverick. He was not too many people did that in his party. But for me, the jaw-dropping moment for him was they showed this clip where McCain's out on the road. This is when he was campaigning against Obama. He was running against Obama for the president of the United States. I mean, think about that. You are running for the top office in the country. Everything's on the line. You're running for president. And in this town meeting, this woman tells him, "Oh, no, I really like you, Senator. I don't trust Obama. I don't like Obama. He's an Arab. He's a Muslim. I think she said Arab, but he's an Arab or he's a Muslim. I don't trust him." This is campaign for the presidency. McCain could have just brushed it off, went and talked to someone else, ignored the comment, and gone on and said, I that's why I want to become president so that we can work on this issue. He did not do that. Are you with me? He said, no, 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 ma'am, no, ma'am. Um, I know Obama. He's a good man. He's a decent man. He's a family man. You know, he's an American citizen, but I think he said he's a decent man. He's a family man. You know, no, he's a good man. He told her. Can you imagine? You know, so basically, I just thought, wow, who's got that kind of integrity these days? You could have easily just ignored her, even if you didn't outright agree with her, but he didn't do that. And he's running against him for the presidency. I don't know. That just struck me because I just thought, wow, how many how many people would do that on the left or the right in the running. So I don't know. That moment impressed me, and I had never really followed McCain that much. And of course, he died. He ended up dying. But so I wanted to throw that out to you. So what's integrity for you? Do you have integrity? And my favorite definition of integrity is doing the right thing when no one is looking. So as a public speaker, are you going to represent the truth? Are you going to tell the truth? Are you going to present different sides of the argument, but still persuade us that your side is the correct one and let us make our own decision? You know, what do you stand for? And remember what Walter Ong said in his book, Orality and Literacy. You cannot erase a spoken word. Think about that. And I'm going to leave you with this. So I'm going to close with that. You cannot erase a spoken word. So as a public speaker, you do have to consider that. You have to be careful, you know. And even on an interpersonal level, that's true too. That's one of our communication axioms. Communication is irrevocable, okay? Once it's out there, you can't really take it back. Are you with me? It's irreversible. Communication is irreversible. You can say, "Oh my gosh, I didn't mean to say that. I take it back." But guess what? It's out there. You said it. Now it's in the receiver's court. Now the receiver has the choice to either forgive you, to accept your apology, to think, you know what, I've put my foot in my mouth sometimes and said things I didn't really mean, or not. Because when you're a public figure and you say something on on using the channel, a mass medium, right? That's reaching a mass audience, and you say something that's racist, sexist, etc., you're not going to be put in jail, but boy, does it have consequences, right? So if you say something unethical, you might not go to jail, but that's not to say that there are not consequences. And a lot of times that public figure apologizes till the cows come home, and we just don't believe them. You know, we kind of feel like, no, you showed your true colors. It's over. Communication is irreversible. You cannot erase a spoken word. So, what kind of ethical speaker are you? What do you stand for? Well, stay tuned for some ethical questions tomorrow in class.